I dated an art student for a few weeks back in college. Her name was Jenny, and though I think we both knew it wouldn't work out, we still had some fun. For our third or fourth date, she invited me to this art show where two of her paintings would be shown off. It was at a local gallery, just a short drive from campus, in a part of town that felt forgotten. The building was old, crumbling brick on the outside, the kind of place that looked like it had been standing too long, collecting dust and secrets no one cared to uncover. When we arrived, the parking lot was nearly empty, just a couple of cars scattered under flickering streetlights. Inside, the gallery was a cavern of white walls and creaky wooden floors, the air heavy with that stale, institutional smell. Only a handful of people wandered around, their footsteps echoing in the vast, dimly lit rooms. I remember thinking it was strange. Shouldn't an art show have more life? But for her part, Jenny didn't seem to notice. She grabbed my hand and led me through the maze of galleries toward the back, where her pieces were displayed. The deeper we went, the weirder it got. The paintings lining the walls weren't what I'd call normal. They were dark and twisted, distorted figures with hollow eyes, shadows stretching too far, colors bleeding into each other like something out of a bad dream. The lighting didn't help at all. It was weak, casting long, jagged shadows that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking. I tried telling myself it was just the vibe of the place. Old buildings can be creepy, right? But my stomach was already knotting up. We finally reached the back room, and there they were, Jenny's paintings. I'd expected bright landscapes, maybe flowers or something cheerful, based on how she talked about her art. But these? They freaked me right out. Swirling blacks and reds, shapes that looked like they were writhing, screaming silently on the canvas. One had a figure bent backward at an impossible angle, its face smeared into a grin. Jenny stood there, beaming with pride, while I forced a smile and tried not to let her see how much it freaked me out. After a few awkward minutes, she suggested we explore the rest of the gallery. I really wasn't feeling it. Something about the place was gnawing at me, but I didn't want to look like a wimp, so I nodded along. We wandered through more empty rooms, the silence pressing in thicker with every step. That's when I started hearing things, faint whispers, like someone muttering just out of reach. There were soft footsteps too that didn't match ours. A few times I'd whip around, expecting to see someone, but it was always nothing. Just more paintings staring back at me with those lifeless, painted eyes. Then we found it, a plain, unmarked door tucked into a corner. Jenny's face lit up. Maybe they keep the older stuff downstairs, she said, already reaching for the handle. I hesitated, every instinct screaming at me to turn back. However, Jenny was insistent, her excitement dragging me along. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Against my better judgment, I followed her down. The basement was actually worse than I'd imagined. The light was barely there, just a few flickering bulbs dangling from the ceiling, casting a sickly glow over rows of shelves packed with dusty paintings and sculptures. The air was thick with mold and decay, clinging to my throat. We walked deeper, the shelves stretching out like they went on forever. Jenny was ahead of me, chattering about the art, but I couldn't focus. The space just felt way too off, too big and too empty, like it didn't even belong in the real world. And then she was gone. One second she was right there, the next I was alone. "Jenny?" I called, my voice bouncing off the walls. No answer, just that hollow echo. My heart started pounding as I tried to retrace our steps, but the basement didn't make sense anymore. The rows of shelves twisted and turned, leading me in circles. The paintings on them, they weren't random anymore, they looked familiar. Like scenes from my own nightmares, a figure running through endless halls, a face pressed against a wall, me, trapped in this gallery with no way out. I started running, panic clawing at my chest. The walls felt closer, the air colder, like the place was tightening in around me. Then I heard it, Jenny's voice, faint and warped, calling my name from somewhere deep in the maze. I followed it, desperate, but it only led me further in. The paintings blurred as I passed, and for a split second, I swore I saw myself in one, my own face staring back, wide-eyed and screaming. Just when I thought I'd lose my mind, I stumbled onto a door. I didn't care where it went, I threw it open and staggered through. Suddenly, I was back in the main gallery, but it wasn't the same. The lights were off, the room silent and empty. I checked my watch, hours had passed, though it felt like minutes. My hands were shaking as I searched for Jenny, shouting her name into the void. Nothing. I found a staff member locking up, and when I asked about her, he frowned. "I never saw a girl with you," he said, like I was crazy. I left the gallery, my mind spinning, and tried calling her. My call went straight to voicemail. The next day I went to her dorm. Her roommate said she never came back from the art show. No one had seen her. I tried to piece everything together, but the more I thought about that gallery, the less real it felt, like I'd slipped into some in-between place where time and logic didn't apply. Years later, I still dream about it, those endless halls, those twisted paintings, and sometimes, in the shadows, I think I see Jenny, her face pale, her eyes empty, beckoning me to come back. For a while after my long-term girlfriend Monica and I broke up, I was pretty depressed. Every day was a battle to get ready for work, and afterwards I just lay down on my couch and scroll social media. After a few weeks, my friends stopped trying to get me to go out with them, and I was alone. Eventually, I started to hate coming home too, so I'd stop off at the town's rec center and just wander around the elevated track. I looked down over the basketball courts, and I'd lazily walk around it and zone out watching people play. The rec center itself wasn't anything special, just an aging building with chipped paint and scuffed floors, the kind of place that felt stuck in time. The elevated track circled above the courts, bordered by a small metal railing that creaked if you leaned on it too hard. During the day, it was alive with noise, the squeak of sneakers, the thump of basketballs, and kids shouting. But I usually showed up later, around dusk or after, when the place emptied out. By then, it was just me, the hum of the overhead lights, and the occasional distant clang from someone locking up downstairs. At first, the walks were really a relief. The monotony of pacing the track numbed my mind, giving me a break from the breakup replaying in my head. I'd watch the last stragglers finish their games below, their shadows stretching across the court as the light faded. The solitude felt good for a while, until it didn't. I remember it started one chilly October evening. I was halfway around the track when I noticed a shadow flicker across the court below. I stopped, peering over the railing. No one was there, just an empty gym, the basketball hoop swaying slightly like someone had just taken a shot. Eventually I shrugged it off as a trick of the light and kept walking. But then I felt it, a sudden drop in temperature, like I'd stepped into a pocket of cold air. My breath caught, and I glanced behind me. Nothing, just the dim track stretching into the distance. The next night, it happened again. This time, I saw him. I was rounding the far corner of the track when I caught a glimpse of a figure standing near the railing, looking down at the courts. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing what looked like a faded hoodie and shorts, normal enough for a rec center, I guess. But something was wrong. He didn't move, didn't acknowledge me. Instead, he just stared downward with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Hey," I called out, my voice echoing in the empty space. No response. I took a step closer, and he was gone, like he dissolved into the air. I told myself it was my imagination. I hadn't been sleeping well, and the breakup had me on edge. But the sightings didn't stop. Over the next week, I'd see him in different spots, standing by the exit, pacing the opposite side of the track, or lingering down on the court, his head tilted up as if watching me. Each time, he'd vanish the moment I got too close. And every time, that same icy chill would sweep over me, lingering even after he was gone. I started paying attention to the details. He looked young, maybe in his 20s, with a lean, athletic build. His clothes were outdated, baggy shorts and a hoodie with a logo I didn't recognize. His face was always hard to make out, shadowed or turned away, but there was a heaviness to him, like he carried something unspoken. The more I saw him, the less I could convince myself he was just a hallucination. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers. After my walk, I went home and searched online for anything about the rec center, accidents, deaths, anything that might explain what I was seeing. It didn't take long to find. An article from 12 years ago popped up. Local teen dies in freak accident at rec center. His name was Tyler Evans, an 18-year-old basketball star who'd been practicing alone late one night. The details were vague, something about a fall from the track, a broken railing, and a head injury. The rec center had repaired the railing and added safety signs, but the story faded from memory. There was a blurry photo of him in his basketball uniform, grinning at the camera. My stomach dropped. It was him. The next evening, I went back, armed with his name. The rec center was quieter than usual, the air thick with that eerie stillness you only feel in places that should be alive but aren't. I walked the track, my heart pounding, and then I saw him, standing right where the article said he'd fallen, near a section of railing that still looked newer than the rest. "Tyler?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He turned. For the first time, I saw his face clearly, pale, hollow-eyed, with a gash across his forehead that hadn't been there in the photo. He didn't speak, but his stare pinned me in place. Then he moved, not toward me, but toward the edge. He stepped up onto the railing, balancing impossibly, and looked back at me. My breath hitched as he jumped. I rushed to the railing, expecting to see nothing, or worse, a body sprawled below. But the court was empty, no sound, no sign of him, just the faint echo of my own footsteps. I stood there, gripping the cold metal, my mind racing. Was he showing me how he died? Or warning me? Or something else? After that night, things got worse. I'd hear whispers as I walked, low, indistinct, like someone muttering just out of earshot. Once, I even felt a hand brush my shoulder, but when I spun around, no one was there. The cold spots grew more frequent, and sometimes I'd catch his reflection in the glass panels along the track, watching me even when I couldn't see him directly. The final straw came a week later. I was alone, the rec center dead silent, when I heard it, a basketball bouncing. Slow, deliberate thumps echoing from the court below. I looked down and saw him, dribbling in the dark, the ball glowing faintly under the dim lights. He stopped, looked up at me, and smiled, a wide, unnatural grin that stretched too far across his face. Then the lights flickered, and he was gone. The ball rolled to a stop in the middle of the court, alone. I haven't been back since. I still drive by the rec center sometimes, its windows dark and uninviting. I tell myself it was stress, grief, and anything else but what I know deep down. Tyler's still there, trapped in that liminal space between life and death. Maybe waiting for someone else to walk the track and see him. And I can't shake the feeling that he wasn't just showing me a story, he was inviting me to join it. Back in college, my best friend Joe and I did a bit of urban exploration. For reasons that will become obvious later, I won't share specific details of where this went down, though that doesn't really matter for this story. This was in 2015, and Joe and I were juniors sometime in the middle of February. We heard through various sources that the big mall about 30 minutes from campus would be closing to the public in several months, so we decided to visit and record our journey. The mall was a hulking monument from the late 70s, a place that had once thrived with shoppers but now stood as a hollow shell, its glory days long faded. As we pulled into the parking lot that evening, the sky was a dull gray, heavy with the threat of snow. The lot was deserted except for a few rusted cars, abandoned like forgotten toys. The wind carried a biting chill, tugging at our jackets as we stepped out, our breath fogging in the air. We slung our backpacks over our shoulders, loaded with flashlights, a camcorder, and some energy bars, and approached the main entrance. The glass doors were smudged with years of neglect, and one hung slightly off its track, creaking as we pushed it open. Inside, the air was stagnant, thick with the scent of mildew and dust. The lights were sparse, many burned out or flickering, casting long, jittery shadows across the cracked tile floor. "Man, this place is dead," Joe said, his voice echoing unnaturally in the vast emptiness. "Dead doesn't even cover it," I replied, adjusting the camcorder. "Let's get some footage." We started down the main concourse, passing rows of shuttered stores. Metal gates were padlocked tight, and behind them, display windows showed nothing but darkness or the ghostly outlines of mannequins frozen in outdated poses. A lone escalator stood still, its steps coated in grime, leading up to a second floor shrouded in gloom. The deeper we went, the more the mall felt wrong. The silence wasn't just quiet, it was oppressive, like the building was holding its breath. Our footsteps bounced off the walls, the only sound until, faintly, we heard something else, a low hum like machinery coming from somewhere far off. We stopped, listening, but it faded as quickly as it came. "Probably just the heating system," Joe said, though he didn't sound convinced. "Yeah, probably," I muttered, but my skin prickled. We decided to explore the east wing, drawn by a flickering neon sign that buzzed faintly, "Food Court." The promise of something familiar was oddly comforting, even if we knew it'd be empty. As we walked, I noticed little things that set my nerves on edge. Scuff marks on the floor that looked too fresh, a discarded soda can that seemed out of place in a mall this abandoned. The food court was a cavernous place, its tables scattered haphazardly, some tipped over like they'd been abandoned mid-meal. The counters, once home to burger joints and pretzel stands, were bare, their signs faded to illegibility. Above us, a massive skylight was caked with dirt, letting in just enough dusk light to make the shadows dance. "Let's split up for a bit," Joe suggested, eyeing a hallway branching off to the right. "I'll check out that way, you look around here, meet back in 15? I hesitated, but didn't want to seem scared. "Fine, just don't get lost." Joe smirked and disappeared down the hall, his flashlight beam bobbing until it was swallowed by the dark. I turned back to the food court, panning the camcorder over the scene. That's when I heard it, a soft tapping, like fingernails on glass. I swung the camera around, but the place was empty. The sound stopped, only to start again a moment later, coming from behind one of the counters. Heart thudding, I crept closer. The tapping grew louder, rhythmic, and insistent. I peeked over the edge and froze. There, beneath the counter, was a small music box. It slid open, a tiny ballerina spinning slowly despite no one winding it. The melody was faint and warped, like a lullaby played underwater. I reached out to close it, but as my fingers brushed the lid, the tapping stopped, and something cold grazed the back of my neck. I whipped around, expecting Joe messing with me, but there was nothing. Just the empty food court, silent again. My breath caught as I noticed the skylight. It was darker now, though the sun shouldn't have set yet. I bolted back to the meeting spot, adrenaline pumping. Joe was already there, leaning against a pillar, but he looked off, his eyes distant, his hands stuffed deep in his pockets. "You good?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Joe nodded slowly. "Yeah, just saw something weird down there. Thought it was a person, but when I got closer, it was gone." "What kind of weird?" He shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "I don't know. Let's keep moving." We headed toward the central plaza, where a dry fountain loomed, its basin stained with rust. Benches circled it, some broken, others draped with cobwebs. As we approached, a new sound cut through the silence, a faint murmur, like a crowd talking, too low to make out words. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "You hear that?" I whispered. Joe nodded, his jaw tight. We scanned the plaza, but it was deserted. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a movement, a flicker near the fountain. I turned, and for a split second, I saw her, a girl in a puffy jacket, maybe 10 years old, standing still and staring at us. Her face was pale, her eyes too big and too dark. I blinked, and she was gone. "Joe, did you—" "Yeah," he cut me off, voice shaking. "Let's get out of here." We turned back the way we came, but the mall had other ideas. The hallways twisted, landmarks we'd passed, like the neon food court sign, were missing. Panic clawed at me as we realized we were lost, the map on my phone useless in a place that defied logic. The murmurs grew louder, joined by footsteps, not ours, echoing behind us. We sped up, flashlights cutting through the dark, catching glimpses of shapes in the shadows, tall, thin figures that vanished when we looked directly at them. My chest tightened. It felt like the walls were closing in, the air growing colder and heavier. Desperate, we stumbled into a narrow service corridor, its walls lined with peeling paint. At the end was a door marked "Employees Only." With no other choice, we pushed through and found ourselves in a basement storage room. Crates and old posters were piled high, and the air reeked of damp rot. In the center stood a rusted metal cabinet, its door ajar. Joe approached it, peering inside. "There's something here," he said, pulling out a charred photo album. The pages were brittle, filled with pictures of the mall in its prime, smiling families and busy stores. But the last few photos were different, blurry shots of smoke, panicked faces, and a figure in black standing amid chaos. Before I could process it, the lights flickered, and a low growl rumbled through the room. The temperature plummeted, frost forming on the cabinet. From the shadows, a shape emerged, tall and featureless, its edges smudging into the dark like ink and water. It didn't move, but I felt it watching, its presence suffocating. "Run!" I yelled, grabbing Joe. We sprinted back through the corridor, the growl chasing us, growing into a roar. The footsteps were deafening now, right behind us, but I didn't dare look back. By some miracle, we found an exit, a fire door half hidden behind a pile of debris. We shoved it open and tumbled into the snowy night, the cold air a shock after the mall's oppressive grip. We didn't stop until we reached the car, tires screeching as we sped away. The ride back was silent, Joe clutching the photo album like it was a lifeline. Later, we burned it, hoping to sever whatever tie we'd stumbled into. But even now, years later, I can't shake the feeling that we didn't fully escape, and that something lingered, tethered to us, waiting in the empty spaces we can't see.